Of course, we'll follow any developments in Cancun. Meanwhile, students are planning nationwide protests tomorrow over plans to raise tuition fees, but some believe you don't necessarily need a degree to succeed. Simon Dolan is an entrepreneur and author of the book How to Make Millions Without a Degree. Well, Simon, this is sort of, if you think about all the best-known entrepreneurs in this country, none of them went to university. A few of them actually even took A-levels.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look worldwide even, you look at Michael Dell, you look at Bill Gates, neither of them went to university or certainly dropped out of university, and yet they seem to have done okay for themselves.
But is this a very small percentage of people, though, who have this talent to be able to come up and be very successful entrepreneurs? Because for a very successful entrepreneur, there's a whole litany of people for whom it didn't work out.
I think there's also, they're the high-profile people that you hear about all the time, because obviously some of the things that they've done have been absolutely world-changing, and they're the richest people in the world. But you look at other people who have done well, and you mentioned, you know, nations of shopkeepers and things like that. They're all entrepreneurs. You don't need to be making multi-millions of pounds in order to be classed as an entrepreneur. But what you do is create jobs for people, which is what we need at the moment.
Well, I can say from my university education, the only thing I really learned is how to drink beer. So the question I have for you from an entrepreneur, what are the skills that are really required, that are really imperative to successful entrepreneurism?
Selling. And that's the one thing that people hate. It's the one thing that people don't enjoy doing, but it's the one thing that you have to do. Without customers, you haven't got a business. Doesn't matter how good you are, doesn't matter if you invent a new iPod or a new something, you do need to go out and sell it.
What makes a good salesman?
Empathy with the customer and making sure that the person that you've got in front of you is actually interested in your product. So you've got to qualify the prospect first of all. Make sure that they're the person who can say yes. If they are, then you should give them a good persuasive story.
And you've got to have a product, of course, that they want to. You've got to understand what it is that customers want to come up with a product before you go back to talk to them about it.
Yeah, and this is the great thing about the internet is now you've got the whole world that you can go and research and find out, first of all, maybe get some ideas for a product or a service that you might want to give, or just to research whether there's actually any demand for that in the first place.
It's all very well having the ideas, but the next point comes in, how on earth do I get the funding to start up?
Well, funding for what? And that's the key question. Funding maybe for a big office, for a receptionist, for a PA, for some computer systems or whatever else. People think that you do. When you look at programs on televisions these days about entrepreneurs, you always see them in big offices with secretaries and receptionists everywhere. You don't need that. I started my business on a kitchen table. Branson did the same. I'm sure Bill Gates did the same. And I'm fairly sure that Dell started in his university dorm. None of them had loads of money to start up with.
But you have to realize that there are certain ideas that come out that require equipment to make those things come true. And if you want to buy a new building or if you want to buy pieces of equipment, the banks, they're there for you because you can securitize it. But if you have a service business or something like that, you know, I'm on my 5th service business. I'm developing one right now, and finding money in this current environment in this country is extremely difficult if you don't have any collateral to put it over. So yes, you can probably still start the business. I have, but the progress is fairly slow and frustrating, you must admit.
Yeah, I can see that, and that's a lot of the reason I started an investment campaign on Twitter a year or so ago, because I recognised that there were great businesses out there that couldn't get access to bank funding, and now I've made it very accessible for people to come to myself, 140 characters, pitch your idea. There's a £5 million investment pot that I've put up, so people can come there, but you've got to get my attention, it's got to be a good idea, and crucially, you've got to be able to tell me how you're going to sell it.
What's the typical amount that people are looking for?
I've had anything from maybe £50 to start a leaflet delivery business to somebody wanted £2 million to invest in an adult entertainment business.
What have you invested? What excites you most about something you have recently decided to put some money into?
Well, there was a brilliant magazine called Uncovered magazine, which was started by a girl who had some problems back in her youth, and she had this idea that she wanted to get this magazine off the ground to help people. No way on earth, if she'd have gone to a bank, she would have been able to get any kind of funding whatsoever. But we managed to, I got her some funding, we got the magazine, first issue went in the shops, and it's now outselling a lot of high-profile titles.
Business ideas in 140 characters, I think you're onto something here, Simon, because, you know, we just try to explain the hell out of it instead of trying to be focused on what we're trying to do, though. But I think that the ideas that you have in sort of funding, we need more people to do that. You must admit there's just not enough capital out there. And we need to encourage people to take these chances. And one thing I find different here than in the U.S. is failure on an entrepreneurial basis in the U.S. is actually a badge of honor, whereas failure in Europe as a whole, not just in the UK, is really a negative thing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And the laws are set up in this country. They're getting better, but bankruptcy laws, insolvency laws are they're not as good as they are over in the States, where people recognise that you're going to fail and you're going to start up and do it again.
Because it is worth remembering, if you get rejected first time, keep cracking on. Rachel Lowe, of course, who got rejected by the Dragons and then had Hamley's best best-selling board game.
Yeah, best-selling board game of 2004, I think it was, something like that. Yeah, so they roundly rejected her simply because she didn't know her figures. She did know her figures, she just got caught up on television. But yeah, went on to prove them all wrong, which was fun.
Okay, Simon, good to see you. Thanks very much, Dee, for joining us. Simon Dolan, entrepreneur and author of the book How to Make Millions Without a Degree. Could be very useful in the years to come. British Airways shareholders, meanwhile, have overwhelmingly approved the